part two of incident response planning. My name is Warren Alford, and I'm with ALS Cyber. In episode one, we talked about preparation and some of the things to think about when preparing your incident response plan. This includes personnel and resources, top-down management support, also the elements of the plan itself. Now we're going to move into detection and analysis. Again, we're using the standard NIST 861, and it provides some important things to think about when putting together your incident response plan, also in executing the detection and analysis phase. First, we'll talk about an attack vector. An attack vector is basically any vector that would allow a person or persons, knowingly or unknowingly, to access a computer or network or do something to a computer or network that it is not originally designed to do. Incidents can occur in a lot of different ways, and what's important to remember is that it's not feasible to develop step-by-step instructions for every possible incident, often called boiling the ocean. You want a flexible framework that gives the prescribed procedures, forms, and templates that would help you through this what could be a traumatic time in your organization. Organizations should be generally prepared to handle any incident, but focusing on every possible situation is just too much. And so to deal with possible and what some consider probable attacks is to actually come up with attack vectors and address those to the best of the corporation's abilities. Attack vectors can be anything from external or removable media. Insider threat is a very real possibility. Remember, an attack vector can be initiated by someone that knows they're doing something, or it can come from an insider threat that does not know that they're actually threatening from inside the network. This can be as simple as elevating privilege for someone in the company and then doing something that would cause an attack vector while they're using their elevated privilege. Attack vectors can come from the internet itself. It can be email, impersonation, improper usage, as we mentioned with insider threat. It can be loss or theft of equipment. Do not forget that a very important attack vector that you should think about and consider: suppliers and your supply chain. A lot of breaches happen because a supplier of the real target is breached, and so by pivoting in the supplier's network, the attacker is then able to actually breach the original target company. Social engineering continues to be the number one weakness as far as attack vectors. Phishing campaigns, clicking on a link, these are all things that the human element does that creates these problems inside the company. Attack vectors as external or removable media device, external hard drive, USB flash drive. Many companies have launched polymorphic worms on their environment by using an unapproved thumb drive, and the person that did that was not trying to be malicious. They were trying to get a file from the thumb drive that maybe they had placed on there previously, but the file actually contained a nefarious software. Attrition is another attack vector. Denial of service, or a distributed denial of service, where the attacker attacks the network in such a way with what they call bots, using a lot of compromised devices worldwide to formulate an attack against a victim. The web is obviously, are all kinds of attacks out there on the internet itself. Everything from cross-site scripting, also known as a reflective attack, to websites that are stood up for nothing more than to distribute malware or trojans or viruses. Email, especially business email, continues to be an attack vector. These are executed via email message, sometimes with a link, sometimes with an attachment that contains some kind of malicious code. Once it's clicked or activated or downloaded, or depending on how it is being delivered, it then can do serious damage to the organization's network in the form of ransomware, which we see a lot of today. Impersonation is an attack involving the replacement of something benign with something malicious, like spoofing or pretending to be someone else. Phishing, as I mentioned before, and also spear phishing, which is a dedicated phishing attack against certain individuals. Improper usage is any incident resulting from a violation of acceptable use policies. So, for an example, a user installs file sharing, leading to the loss of sensitive data, perhaps a data leakage, or they use something that is not an approved application, and ultimately the application either has a backdoor, or the application is linked to a state sponsored government. We see some of these things from China and Russia as well. Loss or theft of equipment is really a big issue when it comes to being able to recover the information from these devices. And note that there are other attacks that may not fit into these specific attack vectors. Things evolve, and the bad guys are always coming up with new attack vectors and new ways to exploit those attack vectors. The most challenging part of incident response is accurately detecting and assessing a possible incident. While we talked about in episode 1 paralysis of analysis, we also pointed out that it's important not to do anything until you know what you're dealing with. Even the best intentions can sometimes destroy information and data. So it's important to bear in mind that you need to understand what's happening and then take action. The average time that an attacker is in the network undiscovered is 70 days. That's a long time for an attacker or attackers to be in your network without you discovering them. These are also known as APTs, Advanced Persistent Threats. Incidents can be detected or discovered through a myriad of different things that may be tools, they may be automation, they may be someone just looking at a log. Automated detection capabilities like network-based and host-based IDPS, intrusion detection, intrusion protection devices, antivirus software, log analyzers, as we mentioned in episode 1, they certainly help speed up the detection, and it allows some of the automation to reduce the time that it takes to discover the incident. They can also be detected through a manual means, as we said before, and many times an incident will be detected by someone outside of the IT environment. End users will see something strange. Maybe their computer is rebooting several times for no apparent reason. Maybe they have been presented with some kind of warning that says you need to click here to update your system or what have you. Taking the time to call the help desk and verify before you click is very important. And in order for people to know that, they have to be trained and they have to have awareness of what is happening and ways to report that. Sometimes the volume of potential signs is very high when you start looking at the culmination of information in retrospect. There may be several indicators, but putting that information together and correlating that information is sometimes a challenge. It's not uncommon for an organization to receive thousands or even millions of intrusion detection sensor alerts per day. So again, it's something that is going to require that your team gets exposure to and training and awareness of these things, but then also your technical team needs to be trained and competent and qualified and have a capability to be able to investigate these things and know what they're seeing and being able to separate the few that are important from the many that maybe are not. Red team and blue team testing is a wonderful tool to help develop the capabilities of your blue team and ultimately your cybersecurity group. Signs of an incident fall into two categories: precursors and indicators. A precursor is a sign that an incident may occur in the future. Maybe your network is being scanned. Maybe something is going on that is causing machines to reboot when they're not supposed to reboot. Anything new or unusual that is happening on the network and on the endpoints can be a precursor of things to come. This can also include a verbal or written threat from a group stating that the group is going to attack the organization. This is usually in the form of hacktivists that are maybe upset with a target that they have done or not done what they believe to be ethical or the right thing to do. And so sometimes this will bring these groups against an organization. An indicator is a sign that an incident may have occurred or may be occurring right now. So you look at your intrusion detection sensors, antivirus software alerts. System administrator may see a file name with unusual characters in the file name, or maybe a file is renamed to something that does not look exactly right. And this is usually discovered by those that are in the system on a daily basis looking. So your cybersecurity group will be familiar with what things are named and how they act and how they interact with other parts of the network. And so these individual nodes, when they are doing something different, that may raise the alarm. Or a log being erased or otherwise tampered with can be an indication. And so it's very important for the team, especially the blue team, to become familiar with what normal looks like and be able to investigate what is considered to be non-normal. 861 has a list of precursors and indicators, and I encourage you to go over and take a look at these because these are a good place to start when you're looking at your threat vectors and you're starting to do your modeling of those vectors. This is a real good way to get started in brainstorming, taking a look at some of these common sources of precursors and indicators. Some incidents are very easy to detect. So if you see a ransomware screen on your computer, that's probably ransomware. However, some incidents are not easy to detect, and it may require digging through logs. It may require standing up other tools to collect data and information. It may require automated tools to be able to look back through logs and again separate the important from unimportant events that have taken place. It may also require standing up something like TCP dump or Wireshark to be able to collect packets to not only understand that there is something there, maybe through a C2 type arrangement, but also seeing what it's actually doing, what packets are moving, and what's contained in those packets as well. Insider threat can come from anyone with access to your data. As I mentioned before, sometimes insider threats do not know that they are an insider threat. Sometimes doing what they think is something that is benign may be causing a very critical attack vector to be opened. These are sometimes well-intentioned employees, but they can be disgruntled employees. Think about how many employees your company may have laid off recently. Think about how many employees may feel that they were unjustly passed over for a promotion or disciplined through HR processes. These can be full-time or part-time or even contract employees. It can be executives, middle-level managers, or hourly employees. It can also be your business partners or suppliers. Something that we see is the stealing of proprietary information by other businesses that are competing with your business. Seeing what those patents look like, seeing what your business processes look like, what gives you the strategic advantage in the market. These are important things that your competitors and even your clients would like to have. And obviously, state-sponsored attacks to collect all of this proprietary information is a serious problem across all industries. Some countries will steal the secret sauce, so to speak, and it doesn't cost them anything in developing that technology if they can steal it from another source. You should engage security, HR, and legal before you zero in on these insiders. Again, it may not be malicious. It may be something very innocent that person or persons does not realize they're doing. But you should gather intelligence on the employee activity. You should monitor the surfing and email habits of these individuals. You should review the data and summarize what your findings are. And then you should also get his or her side of the story at the appropriate time. If you find evidence of criminal activity, you should notify law enforcement immediately. No questions asked. This includes child pornography or fraud. Any illegal activity like that needs to be reported ASAP. Many companies in the past have learned a very tough lesson by trying to deal with these particular type things in-house, only to be pulled into the investigation after the fact because they knew what was happening and they did not notify law enforcement. Detection and identification is obviously important. You have to be willing to alert early, and you have to give your employees the ability to do that. Don't be afraid to declare an incident. It is much better to declare an incident and it not be an incident than not declare an incident, and that would allow the advanced persistent threat actor to remain in your system even longer. We often hear during incident response situations and breaches, well, I saw that and it looked strange, but I didn't think it was important enough to mention. There should be nothing that would hold back your employees from reporting something, and there should be no punitive measures taken for ringing the alarm bell, even if it turns out to be a non-event. Everyone should maintain situational awareness, and you should assign a primary incident handler once the incident has been declared. Always enforce a need to know. Remember, the attack may be coming from within the business. Think of insider threat. So you want to make sure that the need to know is there before revealing any of this information. And also remember that your team may be called to testify in the future. Use of out-of-band communications like cell phones, landline, outside the network, they can be used and should be used. Remember, your voice over IP may be in the scope of the attack. So what you don't want to do is use voice over IP and have the attackers listening to your every move. You should ensure the email communications are encrypted, and you should share the keys in advance. This should always be part of your incident response planning, and part of your to-go bag or jump bag will contain any key material or anything like that. Profiling is measuring the characteristics of expected activity so that changes can be identified easily. Examples of this are running file integrity checks, monitoring network bandwidth. Do you see anything unusual? Is there an unusual increase in bandwidth? These are all indicators that you certainly would want to investigate. The most important takeaway from this is to know normal behavior. What does normal look like? For your cybersecurity team, your network admin should know what normal looks like on their network within reason. Obviously, things change almost on a daily basis. However, there should be some norms and some baselines that are established. Many companies say, "Why do I need a baseline?" This is the very reason why. Because if you don't know what the baseline normal looks like, you may not be able to identify what is not normal. And one way to gain this knowledge is through reviewing log entries and security alerts, doing that due diligence to see what looks right and what does not look right. And remember, if it does not look right, trust your instincts and go ahead and declare the incident. Create a log retention policy, because you can always go back and take a look, and you may have to go back a month, 2 months, even 6 months to see what normal looked like during that time period. Remember, your advanced persistent threat may be in your environment for 3 or 4 months before the actual attack takes place. So you begin to notice an increase in bandwidth as maybe data and information is exfiltrated from the system. Having a log retention policy and being able to rely on that to go back in time to see what it looked like at certain intervals is going to be very, very important. Perform event correlation and filter the data, being able to look at the categories of your indicators and separate the highest significance from the lower significance, and then having an understanding from the technical side of how will this affect our network. So if a person has access to something and they have the ability to elevate their privilege, what are the risks with that? If they elevated their privilege, could they pivot into another system, or could they continue to elevate their privilege? These are all things that you want to think about when you're looking at your attack vectors and threat models. Keep all of your host clocks synchronized. Sometimes it's overlooked, but using your network time protocol and making sure everything is synchronized is going to really help you, because if you're having to correlate event logs and one time is this and one time is this, and maybe they're separated by a couple of time zones, this is just an added layer of complexity that you really don't need to work through in the middle of an incident. Maintain and use a knowledge base of information. So you should always be gathering data and keeping that information, what you have learned, in some kind of database or databases. Even your help desk should be collecting this information and putting it in a knowledge base as they go through their daily routine. What did they discover? What was the situation? How was it rectified? How many end nodes affected by this particular help desk ticket? It can be something very simple that is the key to unlocking the overall solution. The current status of an incident, the summary of the incident, indicators, other incidents that may be related. These are all things that should come together and form a picture you can use over and over again, especially as you test the system. Being able to do a lessons learned and add that lessons learned into these knowledge databases is going to help you. Also remember, there may be a chain of custody when you're talking about legal or future litigation. It's going to be important that you follow those rules of evidence as well. Impact assessments, contact information for employees that are involved, a list of evidence gathered through the incident, comments from your incident handlers, next steps to be taken, and don't forget the lessons learned. And the lessons learned should feed back into possible incident response plan revisions and updates. Internet search engines like Google are a great resource for doing research, and these are used on a daily basis by many cybersecurity professionals as well as red team and blue team members. For instance, if you need to run a packet sniffer, you need to maybe review what's the quickest way to do that, or maybe you're using software like TCP dump or Wireshark or something like that. You should be familiar with it and you should use it on an ongoing basis if you're part of the incident response team. However, if you're an admin in IT, you may not be exposed to these things, but you may need to understand how to do it. If you suspect an incident, you may want to start collecting those packets as soon as possible. You should also seek assistance from others. If your incident response team lacks sufficient capabilities, reach out to your cybersecurity assurance team, the group that audits IT, the group that forms your red team. These are all really good resources. Incidents may affect your CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are important to realize that you may have reporting requirements as well. Data exfiltration is the unauthorized copying, transfer, or retrieval of data from a computer or a server. An incident that results in exfiltration of sensitive information may also affect other organizations if any of the data pertains to the partner organization. This is where it's important to understand your customers and also your suppliers as well, and understanding the data flow between those entities and your company. Rating incidents can be very helpful in setting a priority, especially if you're having multiple incidents happen at one time. You will need to triage those, and by coming up with the rating system, which NIST 861 provides a lot of guidance on, this is going to allow you to take the most serious or severe incidents and work through those and hopefully protect your assets by eliminating that first threat and then working through those that may not have been rated as severe. Having an incident response checklist or checklists is a very important part that will allow you to walk through systematically with what needs to be done, who needs to be involved, how do you collect information, how do you analyze it, and then, as mentioned earlier, if there's going to be legal ramifications, perhaps litigation in the future, it will help you to preserve the chain of evidence for that future litigation. In our next episode, we're going to talk about containment, eradication, and recovery, along with post-incident activity as well. If your organization is interested in what we've been talking about here, and perhaps your organization does not have the capability or the knowledge, skills, and abilities, reach out to ALS Cyber. We will be happy to discuss and happy to help.